436 victims. A 7-year reign of terror. The Champawat tigress holds the record for the most human kills by a single animal. She is known as the Devil of India. On a cool afternoon in 1907, a young girl, along with 2 other women from a small Indian village, went to a ravine to gather leaves for their fires and homes. The afternoon was pleasant. The humidity of the jungle cooled by the clouded skies. They were looking forward to a bout of rain. With baskets and knives in hand, they scrambled up the trees and quickly got to work, all the while chattering gossip between the thick leaves. After the young girl had gathered enough leaves for her home, she slid off the branch feet first and immediately screamed in terror when a tiger slammed its paw into her foot. Yelling and thrashing, she desperately tried to haul herself back up onto the branch, but with a hard pull, the tiger yanked her clear of the tree and pulled her into the ravine. She could hear the screams from the other 2 women, their shouts and desperate pleas echoing in her ears moments before the tiger's teeth tore into her throat and killed her. And so the Devil of Champawat claimed its 434th victim. In the 1800s, it was said that the war between tiger and man was so fierce in India that either man or beast could come out the victor. People would walk between villages in groups, holding torches up high to scare off any would-be man-eaters. In nature, the Bengal tigers are fiercely powerful. Their bite force alone is over 1,000 pounds square inch, and their canines are the longest of all the cat family. They can carry their prey over a mile, even if it's heavier than they are, and they can easily reach speeds of around 40 miles per hour. To top it off, tigers are known to hold a grudge and will hunt down those who have wronged them. One can then imagine how an abundance of tigers can lead to them becoming a living nightmare. The Champawat devil had been terrorizing the small community between Champawat and Pali for well over 4 years. Having been chased away from the small village, town of Nepal, the tiger's reign of terror showed no signs of slowing down. Victim after victim fell under her paws until the people finally placed a bounty on her head. Many hunters would answer the call, but each returned home in shame and failure. She was far more cunning than they'd given her credit for. She was careful, cautious, smart, and vicious. But a young man who had lived out his life in India, hunting many different animals, also heard the call. His name was Jim Corbett. Jim Corbett would become one of the most prolific man-eater hunters in history. But in 1907 he was young, inexperienced, and he was up against one of the most vicious man-eaters in history. When they summoned him, Jim Corbett immediately asked for the price on the tiger's head to be removed. Unlike many of his fellow hunters, he did not see the tiger as a crazed monster, but rather as an animal desperate to survive. She needed to be stopped, but he'd be damned if he did so for the sake of money. For 4 days he travelled through the hot jungles until he came upon the village of Pali, where he found the small town in disarray. The square was filthy, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Spotting movement in the huts, he settled in the town square, started a fire, and decided to wait. Soon enough, pale-faced, terrified villagers trickled out of their homes. They told him they'd been hiding in their homes for 4 days to escape the tiger, to escape the devil. The tiger had stalked the road between Pali and Champawat for the whole week, roaring loudly in the night, waiting for new prey. But they refused to even budge an inch. Now they were running out of food. Realizing their dire straits, Corbett immediately got to work. He took a man with him and headed to the ravine where the poor girl had been killed. He found the pug marks, or tracks of the tiger, and quickly ascertained that they were dealing with an older female, well past her prime. All remains they found of the girl were a few scraps of bone, which they took back to the village to be cremated. A new death would lead him to the neighboring village of Champawat, where horrified eyewitnesses told him how Shaitan, the devil, had carried a woman by the small of her back into the trees. She'd still been alive, screaming and begging for help, but their own fears had prevented them from following the beast. Corbett would also meet a poor woman on the far outskirts of town who'd been struck dumb when the tiger had attacked and killed her sister months prior. The mute woman had chased after the tiger, begging the animal to take her instead, but the tiger had paid her no heed, and had disappeared into the bushes. Corbett gathered as much information as he could about the tigress, but this information was only helpful so far. He needed a strong lead. He needed a fresh sighting. While Corbett was speaking to the head of the village, a young man came running up to him, breathless and scared witless. The devil had struck again. Grabbing his rifle, Corbett set out into the jungle to find the tiger and hopefully end her reign of terror. He tracked her through the thick bush to a rocky area nestled in a gorge. The sweltering heat made it difficult to breathe in the thick foliage, but Corbett couldn't afford to let his guard down for a moment. He could hear the tiger shift and move, see her just beyond his vision, staying just out of sight, beginning to stalk him. He could feel the terror and excitement rising within him. If she pounced, the chances that he could fire quick enough was slim to none. This was her territory. As the sun began its slow dip, Corbett knew that in the dark he stood absolutely no chance against her, so he started back to the village to start work on his new plan. If he pursued her in her own territory, he would be at a disadvantage and in great danger. So he would just have to force her into an area where he could get a clear shot. Early the next day, he stationed the villagers on the crest of a hill opposite another hill. At the bottom of the hill was a wide ravine. On his signal, he told the villagers to make as much noise as possible to flush her out and force her into the open. The plan was to set up a position on the neighboring hill and shoot her once she came into view. But the villagers were perhaps a little too eager. At a staggering 150 yards away from his hoped position, the villagers started making an indecent amount of noise. Corbett ran as hard as he could over the uneven terrain, almost breaking his neck. Above him on the other side of the ravine, the cacophony of guns, pots, pans and screams swelled over the hill. He hit the ground, settling in the tall grass, praying he hadn't missed her. All he could hear was the continuous roar of sound and cacophony, and he felt his heart sink. Then she appeared. Old yet majestic, she trotted through the underbrush, her eyes wide and ears pinned back at the ruckus. Wasting no time, Corbett took aim and fired. The bullet hit her rump. She snarled and took off. Taking aim again, he was unlucky to land his second shot just behind her as she slipped up a rock. Cursing his bad luck, he set off after her into the foliage. Above him, cheers roared in the ravine, and he prayed that the people would stay put for the time being. He found the tigress standing on a rock, her body tired and eyes glazed, but upon seeing him she fell low to the ground, her teeth flashing as a quick warning. He stood his ground, and she snapped into a charge. Corbett fired a third time, this time clipping her in an outstretched paw, which was ready to crush his skull. She collapsed and crawled up and away, to finally collapse on a stone outcrop and died. Corbett crawled up the stone outcrop and knelt next to her, and instantly his heart broke. Her jaw, completely shattered on top and below, was a cry against humanity. A foolish hunter who had wounded her years ago and had not had the decency to finish the job. The bullet had completely crippled her. She must have been in extreme pain for most of these years, and in her desperate need for food, she had attacked and killed villagers. Shaitan! Shaitan! The word carried up and over the ravine, and before he knew it, the villagers were upon him, demanding that she be handed over so that they could hack her to pieces. Each of these men had suffered from this tigress in one way or another. Corbett could not blame them for their anger, but he could not allow them to hack her to pieces. Somehow, he managed to stop them, and slowly they began to calm down. When he did finally hand her over, they carried her down the rock with reverence. The reign of terror had finally come to an end. The tigress would be taken from village to village to prove to all the people that the devil had been slain. Corbett would eventually skin her and take the pelt with him as a trophy, but not before making one final stop. He took the pelt to the mute woman, and when she saw the skin of the dead tigress, she ran through the village, calling all to come and see. He remembered the awestruck expression from her children at that moment, as for 12 months before that point, their mother had not spoken a word. The story of the Champawat Devil remains a terrifying tale of darkness, tragedy, and a serious example of nature's fury. But dead center, at the heart of it, is the rallying cry against the unfairness of it all, of a tiger who had turned man-eater due to the stupidity of a hunter who had wounded but not killed. It is very possible, though, that her anger had manifested in her need to kill people. It was a hunter who had wounded her in the first place, and tigers do hold grudges. But perhaps in her story, we can all remember that sometimes anger can be justified.